Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the wait. I welcome you to today's presentation, MasterClass CSU. My name is Charles Ray. I have the honor of making today's introduction on behalf of the Western Australian branch of the IMarEST. We gather today to gain insight into how the commissioning and startup, CSU, phase of a project can define the project as a success or failure. This is a brief presentation, and we aim to have concluded within 45 minutes, including questions. With regards to the questions, I would like the audience to take a moment now to go to slido.com, that's SLIDO.com, and use the code MasterClass CSU, capital M and capital C, as well as capitals for CSU. On slido.com, you'll find a brief poll to assist our speaker and a space to write your questions. Questions will be put to the speaker at the end of the presentation. Today, we only have one speaker, Alan Mills, and Alan has a close association with the IMarEST. We're very grateful to have him here today. Until March this year, he has been a trustee and committee member of council since 2012. And at a local level, he was chair of the Gulf Coast branch in Houston. That was between 2012 and 2019. Before that, he was the chair of the East of England. He has been a chartered engineer and a corporate member of the IMarEST since 1985. So we very much welcome your contribution here today, Alan. I hope you enjoy the presentation. And without further ado, I'll hand you over to Alan.
All right. Thank you very much, Charles. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining this this brief introduction to MasterClass CSU. It's something that's very, very close to my heart, and something it's an area of the industry as an engineer that I have been working in almost my entire career. Either in CSU itself, commissioning and startup, or in operations when I worked for Shell many years ago, and then within project teams as well when I had roles in project management. But I have worked in and come back to for the last 25 years or more to commissioning and startup, and that's really where I've kind of made my home, if you like, with my business. So I run a particular. I authored a course in commissioning and startup. It's called MasterClass CSU, the name we see here, and it's something which I have delivered around the world. And I'll be coming to Australia. I'll come on with some more details about that. I'll be coming into Australia next month and further into the region. As Charles mentioned, there's a chance for you to be able to take part in a survey. It's interesting for me to know a little bit more about who you are and where you come from and what sort of background you have. So, as a bit at the risk of doubling up on questions, I would be very keen. You can either use the Slido details that Charles mentioned, or if you wanted to double up, you're more than welcome to do that here and scan the QR code with your phone, or just go to slido.com and put that number in. Like I said, it's doubling up. You can do exactly the same as Charles said. The results would be similar. So interesting to know where you've been working since 2018. What sort of industries you've been working in. So if anybody has completed the poll that Charles mentioned, if you could, I don't see those results. If somebody could just, maybe Charles could tell me what sort of answers we're getting. If anybody wants to do this one, that's fine. I should be able to see coming up on the screen in a word map the kind of areas that you have been working in. If we don't have any responses to that, that's okay. I don't want to dally on it and linger. So I'll just move on to the next. We can deal with this at the end. find out what industries you've been working in. We can also, you can tell me, if you'd like, what industry you would like to work in the future. And you might think that that's a rather strange question to ask. I've been asking these questions now for about 10 years or more. And what I have seen increasingly in the last 5 years, and then particularly after the pandemic, is that an increasing number of people are now either working in the renewable sector or are aspiring to work in the renewable sector. And by renewable sector, I include the broadest possible range, including civil nuclear in that as well. We have like I say, I've taken this course around the world, and I asked this question, and an increasing number of people seem to have that broad range of experiences and aspirations now, whereas previously it would have been very much the high 90%, 95 or more percent of people would be from an oil and gas background and process industries, and maybe one or two on a course would have an alternative background. Okay, so a third question, and again, we can come back to these at the end. You can, when you raise questions, just to let me know if you've had any direct experience of working in CSU. That would be just, again, interesting to know. It's either a yes or no answer. You have or you haven't. I'm not talking about how much experience you have. Some of you may have had some experience, and it would be useful to be able to hear about that. And perhaps if you have any questions at the end, we can touch on those. So today I want to, as Charles said in the introduction, to really focus on success and failure. It might not be obvious to you, and it certainly wasn't clear to me until probably nearly 20 years ago, just how critical the commissioning and startup phase is in a project, and how equally and almost to an opposite sense, it was appallingly badly understood by almost everybody in the project organization, with only a handful of people that claim to have any real knowledge of expertise. Now, that really, really bothered me, because, from the 1980s right and through till the end of the 21st century, I would consider myself learning the ropes, as it were, as a practitioner. And from this 21st century, to the end of the 20th century, now from the 21st century, since I've been running my own business, I've really focused on commissioning and startup and the discipline around it called systems completion. So that, and it's really brought into stark relief the way in which the commissioning phase of a project defines it as either an economic success or an abject failure. And it's really binary, night and day. You don't get projects that are kind of somewhere in the middle. If they're in the middle, they're really pretty much in the doldrums, possibly with a lot of bottlenecks and problems. Anyway, so success and failure. So I'm going to show you what we call the influence curve. Now, this is an anecdotal curve. It's not scientific, but it's pretty well known. Now, in this particular graph, which comes from Shell Oil, they show it as a kind of a double curvature. Some people show it as a kind of as a negative exponential that way, and other people like Shell have shown it with an S. But the real point is to take home is that at the start of the project, our influence is high. And at the very earliest stages of a project, which we call, in a phase gate approach, we call phase 1, phase 2, going into phase 3, our influence is extremely high, and then it diminishes considerably right the way through to final investment decision, which is around about here. We can see our influence is declining, and we get then to FID around about here, at the end of the phase 3, define, before we get into phase 4, execute. And then from here, we see a kind of a crossover. This is where the crossover occurs around about sort of FID. And we see the cost of changes really beginning to ramp up. And again, on this graph, which was from Shell, they show it as a kind of a double curvature, but it's going up that way. Some people show it as a kind of the opposite to the negative exponential. They show it as a positive exponential of costs rising. The point is that costs are at their lowest early on in the project when our influence is at the highest, and our costs are at their highest towards the end of the project when our influence is at its lowest. That's the real point of this. So what I do in the course is really show people what success looks like, and also we'll show you what failure looks like as well. But most importantly, then, how to achieve success, what the critical success factors are, and how to attain it. So those are that's what we were talking about here in this in this graph, and the way in which we position ourselves to be able to attain success in any project is what I call through effective early engagement. So being involved when our influence is at its highest. Okay. So in terms of the critical success factors, and these are from the Construction Industry Institute, which is a member-led organization out of Austin, Texas, that you may have heard of. The major operators and major contractors and design houses are members of the Construction Industry Institute. So all of the big guys that you'll have heard of before are paid up members of it. Shell, ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, Wood are part of it, as are KBR and Fluor and Bechtel and so on. So the big guys that we all know of and have heard of, they're all part of this organization called the CII. They did a very important piece of work a few years ago, where they focused on CSU across a whole range of projects, not just oil and gas, some quite large, some quite small, and they found the critical success factors. And I'm giving you the top critical success factors, which are important on each and every project that you will work on. And the first of these is alignment. That's alignment between people and project teams, between contractor and operator, owner and contractor, and having alignment with a common set of objectives. That is not just a truism, it's an absolute reality for the success of a project. And the corollary to that is where you don't have it, then you will see the exact opposite occur, where you will have misunderstood objectives and misalignment and disagreements, and things will go potentially horribly wrong, and can become spectacularly bad if things go very, very wrong with the contract and end up in court or arbitration. So alignment is a very, very important first critical success factor. A second that the Construction Industry Institute found is the CSU methodology. In other words, how well articulated and described in the contract and in the learning that the people on the project will apply, is it understood how commissioning and startup will be achieved? And by that, I do mean all the systems completion processes that work in support of the commissioning and startup through to initial startup and performance testing. and hand over the project to the owner. So it's a sequence of events. It's not just the actual dynamic commissioning of the main rotating equipment or the power management system. I am talking about the overall systems completion, commissioning and startup process, which will start with many projects very, very early on in the project, and it will culminate through to those final events, which will be to provisional acceptance test, performance testing, final acceptance testing, warranty, and so on, which will signify the final completion of the project for most projects. A third factor is the team capability. So there we go. We have alignment between people and organizations. We have the CSU methodology. And then thirdly, we have team capability. And that means having the right people with the right skills and training available at the time when they're needed. So it's all about having that capability. And then fourthly, in terms of the instructions that and the marching orders, if you will, that the organizations will follow, there needs to be an integrated, a logically integrated construction and CSU schedule. And believe it or not, to this day, there are projects, many projects, and one I've seen recently, where the CSU portion of the project is not fully integrated, and that can only ever cause a problem with the completion of a project until such time as it is, because the full scale of critical events will not be contained in that project schedule until such time as there is an integrated commissioning and integrated schedule with the commissioning and startup element included, of course. Now, as I mentioned, those are the top 4 factors, and these are referenced in the particular CII report going back a few years to 2015. It's a great report, and I thoroughly encourage people to investigate it. So what we're looking at and talking about with what it really boils down to is that when projects don't go well, there is a cost to failure, and there is also a price of success, which I'll show you next. But in terms of the costs of failure, these are really big numbers, big impacts, reputational risk and damage, very, very serious consequences. We can have, at one point, we can have fatalities and injuries. We can have real issues on a project with losses of containment. And we can have, ultimately, we can build in production bottlenecks because shortcuts might be taken for perhaps what were thought to be good reasons, good objectives at the time, but they prevent a full commissioning of the facility. Parts of the facility are bypassed or overlooked. Time is never given to being able to go back to those areas once the project's gone into operations. It's quite a difficult decision to take, to be able to shut the place down and commission it fully after it has gone into production. So production bottlenecks can be built in, again, like I say, sometimes quite unintentionally. And where are we? We then have the consequent reputational damage that can occur on the project, the real damage, and of course, ultimately, in the way that we hit the investors is with investment failure. And if things go really badly wrong, then we can have the additional litigation costs that come as well. And I had the recent experience of giving evidence as an expert witness in CSU earlier this year at a hearing in the International Dispute Resolution Centre in London. on a project which had gone horribly wrong, and it really opened my eyes to the absolutely dreadful cost of failure, which is the cost of failure is many times more than the price to achieve success. So I've been talking about this whole aspect of success and failure for many years, and it was only earlier this year that I see, towards the end of last year and earlier this year, I saw with my own eyes and with the evidence I'd been reading and the people I'd been working with, just how serious this can be, and how the cost of failure can be many times, 3 times the contract value. We talk about the price of success on a project being a percentage, a small percentage of the capex cost, whereas the cost of failure can be actually multiples of the contract value, which is just astonishing. So in terms of achieving the price of success, then what you're really buying is you're ensuring that your production targets are going to be met, that you're not going to have any process safety issues. There won't be any serious injuries or fatalities occurring because things will be operated safely. The number of accidents will actually be much reduced compared to those poorly performing projects where failure is occurring. And of course, as far as the investors are concerned, they are looking at investment success. They're looking at getting the expected returns on their investment, and possibly even greater than expected returns. You have a much better performing workforce. Morale is higher. And when morale is higher, productivity is higher, accidents and injuries are much less, absenteeism is less. It becomes part of a virtual spiral. So when that happens, then all parties have something really good to talk about, and the public profile is absolutely excellent, and people are very proud to be able to trumpet their achievements in the best way. And that is a really relatively small price to attain. I have always recommended, since I've been running this course, that the capex should be somewhere in the region of 5% of capex, apportioned to the CSU budget, the commissioning of startups. So I give a detailed breakdown of how that occurs in my training course. But that 5% is spent properly, spent wisely, while influence is at the highest through effective early engagement, as I showed a couple of slides ago, is the way to attain success on any project. And like I said, that is it's totally eclipsed by the cost of failure. And so these are the things that I talk about in my course when I'm training people on the foundation course, which would be for novices through to very experienced people. And that can be in public training, private training, or in cohort training for project teams, for example. In the manager course that I deliver, I go into much more detail at management level about the things that we need to really focus on and give our attention to attain success on projects in the 21st century. And the factors surrounding those projects in the 21st century, which is much around the pursuit for renewables and green energy and net zero and so on, with all those laudable objectives. So that's what I call the price of success. So I don't have any further information to share with you at the moment. We are open to questions and comments, anything you'd like to raise. We could take some of those polling numbers to see what kind of industries you've been working in, perhaps whereabouts you are in the world where you're watching this, and to learn a little bit more about you. And of course, while we have time to answer any questions you might have. So thank you for that. So just as a final note, I will be in Perth from the 19th to the 21st of September, taking my course there. If you'd like to join us, there is a sign-up link here. But I'll be in Perth, and I'm also scheduled to be in Melbourne a week later, from the 26th to the 28th of September. So we'd be delighted to see you while we're in Australia. The following week, 3rd to 5th of October, I'll be in Wellington in New Zealand, and looking forward to that very much. And 2 weeks later, from the 17th to the 19th, I will be in Hong Kong. Okay, so anybody that would like to be to take part in these courses, please feel free to sign up. This I noticed that this slide doesn't mention that from the 12th to the 14th, I will actually be in Singapore. So that's the first place. We'll be in Singapore from the 12th to the 14th, getting in just before the Formula One starts. We finish on the Thursday. Formula One, of course, starts on the Friday, for anyone who's a petrol head. So that's all from me, and I'll hand you back to Charles, and I'll be delighted to take any questions that you might have. Thank you. Stay safe and happy commissioning.
Alan, thank you very much for the presentation. Very insightful, for sure. I've had a quick look at the poll that everyone has access to, and we can see that 67% of people that answered the poll have been working in nuclear, civil, or defense since 2018, and the remaining 33% are in other. There hasn't been any other attendees coming in for renewable energy, oil and gas, or petrol or pharmaceuticals at this stage. I, for one, I'm part of the others category of working in marine and defense, and I can sure see that commissioning of the vessel and all the systems within the vessel is of particular importance. I will just give a little bit more time for any other questions to be typed out onto the Q&A of the Slido website.
I would have to say, Charles, I'm really surprised that there's no one on for who's talking about having an oil and gas background. That's probably a first. So I'm delighted to know that people are watching who do have alternative backgrounds. That's really good to know. It's very encouraging. And it's just that by far the dominant industry down the years has been oil and gas.
Absolutely, I can understand that. I, for one, have a question here. You speak about the right skills at the right time, and you presented those various phases of the project. So how early on would you introduce someone who is specifically looking at the commissioning and startup? Whereabouts in those phases would you introduce them?
In phase two, and ideally in phase two. So if I can go back to the initial slides, I'll show you. Before we get into feed, really, so depending who's doing the work at this point, if it's the operating company, then they will probably have people available, and the most effective thing to do is to bring in a seasoned individual with knowledge of CSU and systems completion to be part of the development of options during phase 2, going into phase 3 for FEED, front-end engineering design. And then to be able to build up to use that person's knowledge and expertise to help shape the contracting strategy that will take place. That, for example, modularization is is important on many projects, and it's going to be increasingly important I think on effectively, you can say, all projects in the 21st century. There's going to be much less, to the point of almost close to zero, stick-built construction taking place on projects in the 21st century. It's just counter-economic and counterproductive in many cases. So that when we have much earlier modularization, we have to have a commissioning hat on, somebody who has real knowledge of how to be able to bring into the earlier phases of the project the knowledge and expertise to be able to pre-commission and where possible, fully commission facility to actually design the project so that it can be modularized and then tested at the module manufacturers, and bringing together individual modules for like a super FAT integration test at the module manufacturers, so everything's going to be tested under factory conditions before taken to the final location. So that's the kind of thing that the person would be doing, giving influence to, and people will be built up. The organization will be built up in support of that project's objectives. So that means people would be, with the commissioning knowledge, would be coming in potentially much earlier than they would have been under a traditional commissioning set of activities that would be taking place at the final location on site. So it's going to give, I'm talking about is giving much more emphasis to people with the CSU skills and the things I teach on my course to be involved in a very much more hands-on, influential way at much earlier stages in the project. I know it's a long-winded explanation, but I hope it answers the question.
It sure does. So thank you very much. Certainly gives us the insight that we're looking for. In this case, I am personally. So I'm not getting a vast array of additional questions coming through for today's session. So I think we will stay reasonably on target for a 45-minute presentation. And I'll take the opportunity to wish you very well on forthcoming courses. And I'm sure people will definitely learn a lot from them. And yeah, we would welcome you back anytime with further insight, should you so wish.
Thank you very much, Charles. I do hope there'll be a chance for us to meet and maybe meet you as well when I'm in Perth in a few weeks' time.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to seeing you. Take care.
Thank you very much, Charles.
And goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.